Welcome to today's bonus episode of Travels by Broomstick. Do you believe in dragons? These magical legendary creatures that appear in folklore tales in many cultures all over the world and continue to spark the imagination in people today. So join us as we go on the search for the Cadw Dragons.
Today's journey takes us to Caerphilly Castle, on Castle Street in Caerphilly, in South Wales, which is in the UK.
Dragons have been seen in medieval manuscripts, carved into stone, portrayed in paintings and pottery, and have been brought to life on the big screen.
Dracaris.
And even feature on the Welsh flag. A symbol of power, bravery, and fearsome strength. The red dragon, or Draig Goch, was officially recognised as the Welsh national flag in 1959. In more recent years, the Welsh dragon has been given the more informal name of Dewi. Dewi is Welsh for David, a reference to Saint David, the patron saint of Wales.
Caerphilly Castle was constructed by Gilbert de Clare in around the 13th century as part of his campaign to maintain control of Glamorgan. The castle is surrounded by a moat and artificial lakes, and is considered to be the most elaborate water defences in Britain. The castle occupies around 30 acres and is the largest castle in Wales. Caerphilly Castle is famous for introducing concentric castle defences to Britain and for its large gatehouse. It is also famous for its resident dragons, and you may spot them flying around Caerphilly Castle's iconic Leaning Tower, or find them relaxing in the Dragon's Lair, where they protect this mighty stronghold.
Many thousands of years ago, in the time of dragons, witches and giants, a great king of Wales was lost in the caves of Dinas Emrys. Surrounded by darkness, stumbling through the cave's deep caverns, when suddenly he saw something gleaming in the darkness. It was a large egg. The king was hungry and cracked the egg open, devouring it whole. But in those days it was said that dragon's eggs were magical, and that anyone who mistakenly consumed a dragon's egg would immediately transform into a dragon themselves. The king wiped the egg yolk from his face, feeling very full after his big meal, when in a puff of smoke the king was gone, and in his place stood an enormous dragon.
Now, as everyone knows, dragons are rather fond of dark, damp places, and he found the cave to be very pleasant. But after some time he grew bored of the same old stalagmites and stalactites, and decided to explore the echoing chambers, and made his way out of the caves and flew high above the tall trees of the forest to find a new lair and perhaps a new friend.
It wasn't long before Dewi the dragon spotted some stone walls, and he swooped down to investigate. He landed on the tower of Caerphilly Castle, causing it to lean dramatically. He was completely enamoured by the sight. He spent hours upon hours exploring the castle grounds before curling up on the bank of the moat for a much-needed rest. It is believed that a love of castles is ingrained within the very nature of dragons. They like having towers to climb and dungeons to hide in. When Dewi awoke, he found he was surrounded by astonished humans. It was St. David's Day, and they were all celebrating. At first, he was very scared. Would they get some brave knight to try and slay him? But the Welsh people have always been very fond of dragons, and so the humans were very excited to see him. They decided to invite him to live at Caerphilly Castle, and Dewi was happy to oblige. He loved his new home and gladly guarded the grounds of the castle. But as time went on, he found himself wondering what else was in store for him, so he embarked on a little adventure.
So one day he decided to go on a quest and journey up to the very peak of Mount Snowdon. When he was right at the very peak, he looked out at the stunning scenery, when to his delight he heard the soft beating of another pair of dragon wings. He turned around to see a blur of blue descending through the clouds, and watched as this beautiful blue dragon laid her claws on the mountainside before him. Their piercing eyes met and studied each other's scales, and they fell instantly in love. Dewi was sad. He knew that he was responsible for guarding Caerphilly Castle, and his newfound love lived here in the mountains.
Dewi asked the dragon what her name was, and she said that she didn't have a name, so he named her Dwynwen, after Wales's patron saint of love. Before Dewi flew back home to Caerphilly Castle, he made a promise that he would meet up again with Dwynwen soon. So the pair started a long-distance relationship, with dragon date nights consisting of late-night flights to watch the stars in the sky or walks around the countryside. But one day, Dwynwen had to cancel their plans because she wasn't feeling too well. She was a little peaky and wasn't sure if she could manage the flight. She had a bit of a fever, she kept sneezing fireballs, and was constantly feeling hungry. So the kind humans decided to call the vet, who came armed with a stethoscope and a welding mask, just in case there were any rogue sneezes, and began to examine the poorly dragon. After a thorough examination, some poking and prodding, the vet stood back in amazement and exclaimed that Dwynwen was about to lay eggs. The humans all cheered. They were so excited at the prospect of baby dragons coming to the castle. So the humans got a big truck and drove her all the way to Dewi's lair in Caerphilly Castle. She slept peacefully the entire way, and as soon as she arrived, she scaled the castle walls, crept over the battlements, and tiptoed across the castle green to find her scaly love. Dewi was snuggled up in the tower at the time when he heard the sound of claws coming up the stairs. It was Dwynwen. He leapt up in surprise, embraced her so tightly, and asked what she was doing there. She explained that she needed his help to make a nest. Dewi was positively brimming with joy at the thought of hearing the pitter-patter of tiny little claws in Caerphilly Castle. He sprung into action, collecting everything he could to make a nest. It took him a whole day, but once it was complete, it looked spectacular. Dewi called Dwynwen over to see his masterpiece. She was so happy with his hard work and gave him a sloppy, slobbery lick on the cheek, a very affectionate gesture among dragons. And the romantic reptiles cuddled up together, or as the Welsh say, they had a cwtch. They were ready for their babies.
The castle custodians arrived to work bright and early the following day. It was a lovely spring morning with daffodils dancing in the breeze, and when they opened the enormous castle gates, they saw a huge nest and the dragons and 2 large dragon eggs.
Dwynwen gently doused the eggs in fire, tending to them. Dragon's eggs are forged in flames. She was helping her babies to grow. It took some time, but soon the eggs began to shake and crack, and then 2 little dragon heads poked out. If you would like to read more of this story and the mischief that the little baby dragons cause, then see the link below for the Cadw Dragons tale. And join us next week as we tell you the history and hauntings of Caerphilly Castle. So, how many brooms do you give the Cadw Dragons at Caerphilly Castle?
Well, I'm going to give the dragons 4 brooms, and that's only because I'm going to try and persuade one to come to Broomstick Towers to keep the bloody place warm, because it's always cold in South Wales.
So they're going to be little fire-starting central heating dragons?
Yep.
Oh, I'd love to have a dragon as a pet. Do you believe the dragons were real?
That's a very strange question to ask me. I've seen them. I've been to Caerphilly Castle.
Oh, that's true. Yes, yes, that's very true. They are real, yes. If you had your own dragon as a pet, what would you name it and what power would it have?
Well, I've already got a pet dragon called Mrs. Broomstick.
Oh, very funny.
And our special power, I would think, would be to keep the central heating going.
I thought it was to make our listeners like and subscribe.
Yes, that would be magical. Well, that concludes our adventures for this week. We hope you've had a magical time.
And we'll see you next week back at Caerphilly Castle for more history and hauntings.